What's up, everybody? So you can see here I have a new engine. It's one I've been looking for a very long time. So you can see it is a model of the C&O H8 Allegheny in 3-rail O scale, full scale, coming in at about 32¼ inches long. This was made by Third Rail, and this would be the second time they offered the Allegheny model in the early 2000s. This particular model was made in 2006, and it was part of the anniversary series of Alleghenies they made in several road numbers. Very limited quantities at the time, and I'm really happy to find one finally. And as you can see from the opening montage of the as found condition run-bys, it's in pretty good shape. It needs a few little things, but we'll get into it. We'll get it set up proper. And let's take a closer look at it while it's still on the layout. Real quick though, I just wanted to show you the box. If you're lucky enough to acquire a vintage Third Rail with the original box, it's pretty easy to determine when they were made. So you can see this particular version had 12 road numbers, and they offered a 2-rail and a 3-rail version of each. Not quite sure what the production run looked like for each number, but I know this engine is number 4 of 17 for this particular 1658 cab number. We'll see that when we get into the shop. Being that it was made in 2006, during that era, Sunset Third Rail was using Train America for the electronics. So that was licensed by Lionel to use their TMCC modular tech of the day. So it sports Rail Sounds 4. And even though the chip is kind of generic, I think it's got pretty much the correct whistle for this engine, as you could hear from the beginning of this video. And mostly everything works, even the smoke. I think this engine's been smoked. You can tell by a little bit of oil on here. I'm not too happy about that. We'll find out how bad it was smoked, but I'll definitely be trying to clean all that up. But anyway, yeah, this would have been EOB, so it had cruise control, and would have been factory implemented. So you can see there's the tether. And it's got the puffing smoke. Interesting, with EOB, you could use the flywheel encoder to generate chuff, or you could use a micro switch cam kind of a assembly arrangement. That's what they're using here, which is kind of nice. So you're definitely getting your 4 chuffs, even though this has simulated articulated chuffing. It's triggered at the mostly correct rate. So we'll listen later as we get into it. During this era, even to this day, most of the articulated exhaust chuff phasing is kind of handled through firmware, basically. So anyway, it's all in good operating condition. A couple minor little things. I'm missing one of these steps off the other side of the tender here on the Fireman side. And I have some Lionel replacement parts that I may try to use to replace it. So we'll figure that out in the shop. I just wanted to show you some of the nice details on this engine. Got all these moving windows. I actually have some pretty decent looking cab figures too. They're pretty good. I mean, I kind of tempted to maybe dull coat them a little bit, but really not too bad. And as we work on it, I'll show you some more of this, but there's features like this, like the turret doors. This is probably the only engine I've ever seen where the sand dome's actually open, and there's kind of screens like rock catchers, I guess, for when the crews are filling this with sand. Really nice. The gap is pretty generous, as you can see here. I may machine this drawbar back a little bit. Haven't decided. It's not killing me, but it would look better if I could get that a little closer. My curves could tolerate it being a little closer together. As you can see, this is their solution for their deck plate to go through challenging 3-rail curves. They just kind of do that shape. Pretty interesting. One nice thing about 3rd rail is some of the details they just put where you normally wouldn't get stuff like this on a Lionel or an MTH. If you watch here, I can actually make it move manually. That's the idea. There's some kind of link in the drivers that tilts that forward and back. Now the rear set isn't working, as you can see. I gotta figure out why. It's not really reacting, although it works. You can even see the power reverse cylinder here. The whole thing works. That is pretty awesome. But I gotta figure out why it's not doing it with direction. I'll show you. We'll run it at the first speed step. I think the first speed step's a little too abrupt for my liking. I know this will run a lot better with a little bit of tweakage. Here's something kind of neat. The stoker, which is actually mounted on the tender frame, the access door works. It's pretty cool. I think 3rd rails are so neat. They just need a little, you need a little patience when dealing with them. So, as you can see, here's an example. Decided to throw its traction tire in the middle of this initial effort to document its introduction to my layout. So, at least it's intact. You can see there's a video. My pal Jake got one of these last summer during Trainapalooza. I was so happy for him. And back in October, when the D3R were here at my house, he was able to run his, but we had to 3D print some traction tires. I don't know if I'll have to do that. I'm gonna try to get away with gluing this back on, but anyway, you can see there's our switch arrangement for the chuffing. I also wanted to show you this. I don't know if you can see this. There's a bearing for the front of the boiler, right about there. Look at that. That is wild. Should be interesting to take this thing apart in the shop. Just wanted to show you too. They put the manufacturer's nameplates on the air pumps. It's really neat. So you can see I'm missing the rear steps here on the tender, and I got this Lionel part. It's from their JLC Allegheny. It's slightly bigger than the original equipment here, so I don't know if it's gonna bother me. We're gonna try to use them. Well, I was just about ready to head into the shop with this beast when I noticed a slight issue with my driveline, and it may be something a lot of people wouldn't catch, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it, and it has to do with my eccentric cranks not being angled correctly. They should be tilted forward when the drivers are at bottom dead center, like this front set here, and both sides of the engine and both sets of drivers have the same issue. So what I'm hoping is that it's an easy fix. The angle on these eccentric cranks are set by a slot in the face of the main crank pin, and these kind of lock in there. So the crank pin angle has to be set just correctly. So what I'm thinking may have happened is that this engine went through a traction tire change at some point, and that the drivers got put on kind of 180 across this axis, you know what I mean? So I'm hoping it's a matter of just dropping this rear axle on both sets of drivers and then just flipping the drivers like that. That'll get my eccentric angle set correctly. So I just wanted to show this. This is kind of cool to have. So you can see there was only 17 of this engine number made at the time. And old Mort was still alive when this was made. Kind of cool, you know, just to have. I also got a nice baggie of spares. I gotta figure out what this is. Kind of looks like ash pan hopper assembly or something. I don't know. Mystery parts. Got some fresh traction tires in there, some hardware, and some kind of shoulder bolt. I don't know if that's for one of the trailing or pilot trucks or the tender or whatever, but we'll figure it out. So I'm looking at what I gotta do here to get these drivers freed so I can just flop them. All matches the certificate. Here's some feature switches here. This is for the smoke unit. And here's a kind of a Chuff rate selector. And the Chuff switches and cams live under here. I want to take a look at this. These are pretty cool. So you can see there's kind of a 2-lobe cam and a 4-lobe cam there, and that's what that switch is selecting. And there's 2 independent cherry switches up there. If you've seen some of my other videos, I swear I'm not totally obsessed, but I just like things proper. I like to get a Chuff cam, if I can, installed in my engines where I can kind of adjust the phasing of it so it matches the crankpin angles. On an articulated, I'm not so fussy because there's so much going on, and there's a lot of articulated sound effects to simulate driver phases, driver phasing changing as the locomotive makes progress, you know. So I'm not too picky, but I do like it to at least trigger 4 chuffs. I don't know why somebody went crazy with grease in here, but I'm going to clean that all up. I don't think that's necessary. Usually look for stuff like this, minor things to fix while I'm in here. I'm going to take this whole thing apart anyway, because I want to chase out some of the wiring and make a few changes when I put in the electric railroad stuff. Nasty. Get rid of this stuff. I don't think we need to grease this up so badly. One minor suggestion when working on especially these third rails is kind of resist the urge to put power to the drive line for any reason while it's upside down in a cradle like this. A lot of times, a lot of the valve gear, things like lubricator linkages, they won't hang correctly since they're inverted, and you can bend things up if you're not careful. So it's probably a good idea to try to get this kind of work that we're going to do now done first, and then get the thing upright before you want to check the drive line at all. So here's that mystery piece, which I believe is the ash dump hoppers for the firebox. As you can see, a couple of mounting holes, and they line up with a couple of threaded holes on this tail beam. The only problem is this is the shoulder bolt mount for the kind of the rear truck. There's the pivot mount, which is there. But if you were to use this is kind of I guess it kind of restrains the swing of the truck. I guess you could remove that if you really wanted that ash pan detail in there, but I don't think I'm going to worry about it. Kind of neat. I don't have the instruction manual for this, so I don't know what the intent was or how they intended you to set it up too. So I'm going to continue on. Let's see what it'll take to start freeing these drivers up. I'm trying to figure out how to get the front set of drivers out. So I have the pivot screw removed, and this steam delivery pipe is detached. But there's some interesting things going on here. Of course, there's the wiring to the Chuff switches, pickup roller, headlight, and there's another steam pipe here coming out of the bottom of the smoke box. And one thing that's kind of interesting is the front shaft seems to be captive, like on a Lionel, where you could slip it right out. You can get the whole front driver out. I gotta figure out what's going on here. Luckily, I think I can get at the eccentrics anyway. None of the screws are blocked by the eccentric rod, so I might be able to sneak by, but I'm really curious as to how to get this front set of drivers out. Plus, I wanted to kind of phase the rods. I wanted them 90 out. So let's see. Typical of what happens every time I try to remove these bottom plates to free up a set of drivers. I can't get it too high because of the pickup roller leads. So I'm trying to chase them out right now. So I've got the whole rear frame here free, but I have to get these access panels out of the way. You can see stuff's falling off already. And quite the adventure. Some pretty unusual screws going up through this rear steam chest. But I'm hoping I can get this freed up so I can just get some slack through here and get this out. Probably have to do something similar for the front. All right, this is pretty gnarly. I got everything freed up, and kind of typical for third rail where there's some mount going through steam chest, you know, vertically. So that was the rear steam chest here for these rear cylinders. And two screws through the back of the cab into the rear of the tail beams here. So what I had to do is I had to take this front driver mount pivot screw out and get those two steam chest screws out of there so I could pick this up. And then I had to put this back in because this picks up as a unit right now. And I'm trying not to grab this in a way to that's gonna screw up any of my valve gear. But there's this front steam delivery pipe. I don't know if you can see just under my right hand. It kind of keys into this slot here. So it's gonna be a lot of fun putting this back together. So I got it back in. So it's captured until you get it back enough. And you can get it out. Now, what I'll do next, I have no idea. I'm gonna hopefully let it rest, figure out how to chase some of this wiring out of here. All right, here's what I got so far. So this nice Bowser cradle, this hardware slot's kind of saving me right now because I got the frame kind of resting in there. Really interesting. A little bit more difficult to work on than your typical Lionel, but not too bad right now. Now I think I can free up some of my wiring. I can see that. They gave me some Molex plugs or whatever. I forgot the name of these. I think they're Molex. I don't know, whatever. I can break loose some of this wiring. I don't know about this front headlight. I gotta chase it to their regulator board, which probably looks like it lives over here somewhere. Pretty interesting though. Front bearing suspension for the boiler suspension over the front set of drivers. Here's that mechanism for moving the reverse gear around. Kind of interesting. I don't know why this one isn't working so good. We'll figure it out. Here's kind of a lever. That one feels sticky. I think that just flops forward with, that one's a lot more free with the driver motion. You see the classic third rail quiet drive set up through here. Now the one thing that's also different is this kind of slip coupling. The front drivers are captive in that slot. I gotta figure out if I can get those apart. But anyway, I'm going to undo some of this wiring and see if I can get the works just completely clear of the boiler here. Well, that was a bit of an ordeal. Some of the wiring, as far as the routing, was a little wild. So even the headlight is attached to this connector here, which is connected to the cab light, so you couldn't even just pop a connector and route it through here. As you can see, I have the boiler front off now, and that didn't help. I ended up cutting the wires off, so I'm going to, I think, rewire this whole thing. So I have maybe one connector coming out of here. I don't know yet. This is pretty strange. So this was the selectable Chuff switch wiring. As you can see, it kind of went up and over through the boiler through this connector that I still had to cut off anyway because it was routed through this rear boiler support. Pretty crazy. So anyway, I'm gonna get the shell out of here for now and get to work on the drivers and possibly probably rewire this as it sits. All right, I figured out the front shaft. There's a 1.5 millimeter set screw on there, and there's a flat on that shaft there. So I got them separated. Should be easier to work on these drivers now. That was pretty wild. I had to chase these leads back to where they were soldered to the tether to lace them through the frame here to free up this bottom plate. As you can see, had to take off the brake shoes and their hangers too to get through here. Now here's something interesting. Here's the mechanism for flopping those reverse linkages around. So it's kind of strapped around the rear driver axle. So this is doing everything it can to make it a real pain for me to change these eccentrics. So let's just continue on. Here's what I was talking about with that eccentric angle. This slot in the crankpin sets the angle of the sets the angle of the eccentric. You can see there's two little nubs sticking out going there. So just carefully. One thing nice about the third rails with these segmented rods, you can kind of take everything apart here like this. All right, let me get the other side free. So it's out, and then this was the idea. I just wanted to do this. Get it back in there. See that clamp? That's really strange. Well, that's what goes around the axle to kind of move that reverse linkage. So I guess it's the friction of that helps it tilt forward and back. So, all right, let's get this back together. All right, so there's one more hitch. These little brass top hat looking things, they sit inside the spring. It's kind of unusual. Typically, these bearings might have a dimple or something in them for those springs of seat, but I don't know. Very interesting. Well, that was quite a bit of work, but I've got the eccentrics kicked forward like they should be. Now, I don't know if they're quite perfect, but we're at bottom dead center here, and you can see this is the Fireman side. And we'll move forward, so I'm getting proper eccentric actuation here. And it is moving the valve a little bit. But you can see when we're bottom dead center, we're kicked forward about, 11 degrees or whatever. And it looks like I've got my reverse linkage working too. So I don't know, maybe one of these Chuff wires was rubbing on it, but kind of interesting. There is a, I'll show you here in a second. There is a port. There's a hole in the bottom plate where you can kind of adjust that little clamp on that rear axle. And I think the idea is to just adjust the drag on it so that it kind of gets influenced by the axle. And kind of pretty neat. This is the lever here. So, you can see you can move it freely. It's the tightness of that little clamp gives you the drag to move this around. So that's one of the reasons why I'm going to put electric railroad in here. I want some nice slow startups, and I'm hoping to get some nice actuation like this. That's pretty neat. Worth the trouble, I think. This thing is not being easy on me. I'm learning a lot. This is really kind of the first third rail articulated I've ever really messed with. And I think this engine's worth the trouble. So we're going to continue on. I'm going to clean up, probably lube this gearbox, and then go to work on the front. All right, well, the rear set of drivers done. Now I can concentrate on the fronts. And here's that issue again that I was talking about. You can see the eccentric is kicked back. And that's what it should look like normally, with the rods all the way down, with the drivers at bottom dead center. So that's the issue. Really neat. I'm enjoying working on this, though. This is a really cool engine. You can see the reverse linkage mechanism here. So it's this kind of drag lever or whatever. Slips on the axle a little bit. You can see it. I'll show you underneath. There's actually an access hole right there, so you can adjust how much drag it puts on the axle. If you can see the screw through there, it's a small, like I don't know, 1.5 millimeter screw. I gotta check that out. Might be smaller than that. But anyway, let's get these drivers freed. Something interesting I discovered is that this front roller is not connected to anything. This engine had like 0 electrical pickup problems on the layout, so I'm not too worried about it, but I am going to run a lead off there. Here's a view of those Chuff switches. Here's the bottom of that, kind of like drag lever or whatever. So that's the screw that you adjust for more or less drag. That's going to come out of there. Let's see if I got it loose. Just a little bit more. All right, let's get these cranks off. So, and here's the problem I faced on the first set of drivers. Kind of threw me for a loop. These little brass top hats kind of stayed stuck to the bearings there. So basically, you just got to spin this way and keep track of this. I got to change the traction tires on these guys too. This front set, they were rolling themselves off out there on the layout a couple times. All right, here's the old stretched out tire. Here's the new one going on. I'm gonna try to film something, a little trick I do. when putting on tires and you don't want to overstretch it. So I just took just a plastic bag and just cut a strip out of it. And this is a way that you can get your traction tire on without totally stretching the crap out of it. This is something I do. I repair machines occasionally out in the field, a lot of hydraulic stuff, and setting seals can be kind of a challenge. So here's the idea, is that you can kind of hold the traction tire here on one side. It's a little awkward right now. And then use this to pull the tire around. Let's see if I could do this one shot. Oops. All right, there it is. A little awkward. I'm not afraid to film awkward stuff on my workbench, though. I've done it before. Anyway, what do you think of that? Normally, I can get that first shot, but that's just a quick way of not overstretching the crap. You know, a lot of times you stick a pick or something in there, and the pick has enough, diameter to it that you can put a good stretch on these tires. So next time you have a fragile tire, and you don't want to hurt it real bad, try that trick. All right, so after all that, I've got the cranks tilted forward like they should be. Now, getting ready to rewire this for the electric railroad controls. So as you can see, I got a bit of a mess going on here. First order of business was to map all the wiring to the tether on the locomotive end. And this is what we had here. This third rail, ground, motor, the encoder, sensor connections up top here, and smoke and chuff. That's it. That's the as found, and this is what I'm going to set up for the electric railroad. I'll keep the power and motor connections intact, but I'm going to run a wire out to the headlight to control it off the R4LC. Smoke and chuff will stay in the same spot, and I'll have an extra connection here. So what I need to do is, because I added this fourth wire for this front pickup roller that was mysteriously never connected, I'm going to have to come up with a different connector. I had this one here, and this had to pass through the boiler support for this bearing pad here. That's why I cut it. This connector never went through there, so I'm going to use this micro JST on this front section here. So I'll have a ground pickup roller, and I'll keep the selectable chuff, although I'll never use it. But with a smaller connector, I can route it through the boiler, and I'll be able to disconnect this without butching it off like that. So I'm going to get started. I have to remove the EOB sensor, which is in good working order but won't be needed. And I'm going to clean up a bunch of this wiring and reroute it. Here's the as found harnesses, wiring harnesses that go up into the boiler. So one's for the smoke unit and one's for that 6-volt regulator that third rail likes to use for the constant voltage headlight and class lights and the lit number boards. So I may rewire this into one harness so I can get a line to the headlight from the electric railroad board, so I have control over it, and keep the smoke unit stuff intact. So I'll have to combine these and turn them into something a little neater. And I want to keep that 6-volt regulator intact just for the lit number boards. Those will stay on the whole time, I think. And I'll probably pull the class lights like I normally do. I decided to rewire the tether while I was at it. So I have kind of a color code here. So red and black is third rail and outside rail power. White is the headlight. Yellow is the chuff line. which will get served off the switches and then go back to the smoke unit and go back to the electric railroad board. Green is the smoke power on, controlled by the electric railroad. So pretty basic. I do have a spare connector on here still. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up this wiring, tidy it up, and create my harness for the boiler connections. So that would be the smoke unit and regulator up there and all that stuff. So the rewiring effort here of the running gear is almost complete. Not as pretty as I hoped, but this is my combined boiler harness. So you can see we've got smoke switch here, Chuff selector on the other side. Try to tidy up the wires. I left a little slack just in case there's some surprises when I go to put this back together. But the smaller front engine connector will make sense when I go to reinstall the boiler. It's just the routing of this. I needed something smaller. Took some doing, but I got the weight out of the boiler here. Kind of interesting. Getting it back in ought to be kind of fun. There's this hole in the front of it, and I was thinking using a dowel to get it placed. It kind of lives somewhere in here. But really, I took it out to get this regulator out of here and to take a look at the smoke unit. Just this Train America puff and chuff style from back in the early 2000s. So I'm going to rewire this. I'm going to completely remove this 6-volt regulator. It's not needed. I'm going to wire the headlamps and the lit number boards together, I think. And I'll put the appropriate dropping resistors in there. All right. The boiler weight is back in there, and luckily they put that hole in there so I could kind of position it with a dowel rod, you know, and line it up on the mounting holes. So it's in. Now I can continue making the harnesses for the boiler wiring. Just hooking up, this is a cab light. It's going to be hooked up directly across track power. So originally this would draw like, this was hooked up to 6 volts. And since it'll go directly across track power around 18 volts, I got to put some dropping resistors in here. So I got a couple 470s in parallel here to drop the voltage and also to dissipate the heat, because this thing's pulling about like 50 something milliamps. So the resistors got quite warm. So I like to, if I have the original incandescent lights, I kind of like to keep them. The one in the cab I like to have kept hooked up across track power. It's just like a quick and dirty track power monitor, you know, just in case you got some issues. But I always kind of like hooking up the cab light like that. It's just, you know, just there for reference. I'll figure out the front end lighting here in a little bit. I'm gonna tidy up this end. All right, so my boiler harness is done. I've got track power coming in, and that just feeds the cab light, ground obviously. I got switched power for the smoke unit. That's either controllable by the electric railroad board or switchable to track power. And I've got the headlight and also the chuff input to the smoke unit. So, and there's a spare wire on here. All right, here's my two harnesses, the boiler harness and the front engine harness. So this was the routing, and this is why I had to change the connector, because I wanted it to get through this support, this bearing support. And it's got a tuck in there. So that's kind of the reason why this got rewired too, because while I was at it, might as well change these out for more flexible wire. Plus these are black, you won't see them. I'll have to shoot some paint in here when I do the weathering. It shouldn't be too difficult, but anyway, this will tuck inside here as this goes back together. So I'm gonna need like 3 hands to do this. I gotta figure out how this is gonna go back together. This thing's pretty wild. Not as insane as I thought. This was like not that bad to do really. So once I got the rear engine tilted in and aligned, everything kind of fell into place. What I was trying to find out was these leads that come through this section, they're pretty clear of the belt. All right, I almost spoke too soon. I did have to pull this back out, kind of laid it over here in this little parch trough. The reason why is this telescoping shaft. You got to get that tightened up on both ends so that there's enough travel and clearance for this pivot to fall into this slot. So I had to take that back apart. Also, I had to get this, see if I can do shaky cam here, this exhaust outlet into the smoke box. You see it's kind of in a keyed sliding slot there. Had to get that lined up, and this steam delivery pipe, which is really annoying because this keeps falling out if I'm not careful handling this. Anyway, gonna get ready to put some more of this back together.